Welcome to episode 93 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today we're chatting to South African skydiver, Matteo Pagani. Matteo, good afternoon. How are you doing today?
How's it, Adam? Very well, and yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good. As we were just chatting now before we started recording, you obviously haven't been able to jump for a while. You must be crawling out, sort of climbing.
No, it's been about 3 months that we haven't been able to jump. And you know, in Joburg, the winter, blue skies, perfect sun, no wind is like, this is our pristine, perfect jump weather. It gets a bit chilly, but it's like perla weather for jumping.
Yeah. I must say, I did my first skydive, sure, must have been about 3 months ago now. It's pretty nerve-wracking. How do you actually do it every single day?
So it's interesting. It starts off, being a sport that you get into for the adrenaline rush. And then it changes. It becomes a sport you get into because of the mates that are in the sport and the similarities with people in the sport. And then it transitions a little bit more into competitive aspects. So the adrenaline doesn't come from the actual jumping out the plane anymore. It comes more from the competition anxiety and the mental prep. And so it changes. You go through different worlds as you're in the skydiving world. And being in it a very long time, you get to see all of those different chapters. Whereas if you're in it for only a short period of time, it's like a quick chapter in your life and you get through it and you're out. But it's got so much depth and so much beauty to the sport that you only really get to experience the kind of true depth of the sport, I would say, from 8 years to 10 years on into it, which is quite fascinating, because very few people stay in sports for that period of time.
Yeah. And we'll get onto all that detail around the sport itself. Do you still get nervous, though, when you're sort of taking off and about to jump off? I mean, I was pretty nervous as hell, and it showed on the video that they gave me. Do you guys still get those nerves after 10 years of doing it?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. If you're not getting those nerves, you better stop. Like, it's not something, I mean, it's never normal. That second before you jump out of an airplane's door, it's never like this feels uber natural. It doesn't feel like that, because there's always the ground and there's always gravity. I guess if there wasn't gravity, it would feel a lot more normal, but no, there's gravity. And so every time you jump out, just before you exit, if you're watching your heart, just starts going pretty much. And then just before you open your parachute again, because these guys can give you a pretty hole-raising ride if they open incorrectly.
Yeah. And let's go back in your life a little bit, Matteo. Obviously, you weren't jumping when you were a kid. Were you an active sportsman in your younger years?
Yeah, so as you can see, I was a pretty good rugby player, and my size and weight carries well in these type of sports, and very physical guy. No, I was sports, but it was always alternative sports. It was never quite the sports that you'd typically find in high school. So saying that, I mean, high school and school wasn't probably the easiest time, but during school, a lot of ice hockey. So I played ice hockey for a number of years, did enduro motorbike races, off-road racing, and then got into climbing. And I've been rock climbing since I was 13. And then it was about 17. So in matric, I was turning 18 that year, and 29th of January 2005, that was the D-Day of the very, very first jump. And man, it was a life-changing experience, and a world-changing experience. I mean, my world changed just like that.
And what made you do it? And the reason I asked that question is, when I did my first jump, I've done one. When I did my jump, I was going to watch somebody else, was my understanding. My wife had booked for me to jump. I'd always said I'd wanted to jump. It was something I'd always wanted to do.
You have an amazing wife. Let's just drop it there. You have an amazing wife. If she took you skydiving, that's a keeper.
But I had absolutely no idea I was jumping. So I rocked up in the other side of Joburg, only to find out that I was jumping as well. So it wasn't exactly my choice to go that day and jump. What made you go and jump out of an airplane for the first time?
So to be honest, I mean, I never had really thought it through all the way, and like I hadn't had this feeling as a youngster that I always loved flying, but I never thought of jumping out of airplanes. It was never something that came naturally if I remember back to high school and being a child. what happened was my best friend Alessandro, who no longer jumps, but he did about 3 static line jumps, and that's where you jump out and it pulls open your parachute immediately. And I went with to watch on his second jump, and you know, sitting there on the ground, I mean, him and all his mates were up in the sky, and I was there watching on the ground, and I was watching them fly overhead and jump out, and just watching. I remember, you know, when your hands sweat and the beads of sweat, you start feeling it's not a hot day, but you can just feel yourself start sweating. That's exactly what happened. I was like, jeez, I can't ever do this. Like my heart was going, and I wasn't even jumping. I was like, no way, this isn't for me. And then it just sunk in after a bit, and I remember someone saying, when you start out, you're on these really big parachutes. They're literally about 4 or 5 times the size of these ones. And when you break, it's like the quietest quiet you've ever heard. It's just like silent. It's unbelievably peaceful. And when they told me that, I was like, oh, it sounds interesting, you know? So yeah, after that, had a few beers in the pub with a bunch of mates, and they were all like, thumbs up, we're going skydiving with you, let's all go. And everyone got excited. We were about, you know, it's still a trick. And come the day that was to go jump, everyone pulled out. So it was only me who actually went through to the drop zone, and I did my first jump in Coltonville, so Johannesburg Skydiving Club. And there were a bunch of Italians jumping in those days, and I come from a little bit of Italian heritage as well. And this fella named Brando is still jumping to this day. Brando walked over to me and he said, Matteo, I can see you are going to be in this sport a longer time. And he gave me a jumpsuit after my very first jump. Like literally, it was a jumpsuit in those days, I mean, you were a student, and a second-hand one back in 2005, you'd pay 1,500, 2,000. It was money we didn't have, right? And he just gave it to me, and I was just like, well, that's it. That's my goal is to wear this jumpsuit. And as a student, you can't wear this jumpsuit until you've done roughly, 25, 30 jumps, if everything goes well. And so he gave me this jumpsuit, and that was it. I was hooked. I was like, I couldn't believe it. It was just such a wonderful experience. And then someone said, so was the first jump the scariest jump you ever did? And I'd say, no, it wasn't the scariest jump I ever did. It was, in fact, the second jump, when you knew what to expect. Now, I hope you don't mind me getting into this experience a bit, because it's actually bringing back a lot of memories that I haven't spoken about in quite a while. But we had what's called a Pilates porter. So it's a high wing plane, very long wingspan with a strut that goes from the fuselage of the body to the wing. And so what you do is they basically brainwash the entire drill into your head. So you do a full day of training, and you get brainwashed for malfunctions. You get brainwashed for how to climb out of the plane. I mean, if you shout malfunction now, I just go, arch, look, handles, right, left, arch, and just drilled into your head, because you can't get those the wrong way around, or else you release your reserve parachute into your broken main parachute, which could be problematic, right? So on the second jump, so the first jump, they open it up, and it's kind of a blur. You've got such high adrenaline that you don't notice the wind blowing as hard as you do the second time, and kind of it's a bit of a blur. It all just happens quite quickly. But the second time as they opened up that door, I was not ready for that sound of the wind rushing in. And so they slow down the plane, and then you have to climb out, and you stick your hand into this wind, and you just feel the wind blowing your hand back, and you grab onto the strut, right hand, right foot, left hand, left foot, and then you shimmy across the strut, and then you hold on, and you look into your instructor's eyes, and he says, ready, and you go, ready, and let go, and then you count, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, check. Float, shape, spin, and you're looking for all these different ideas. I mean, I haven't said these things in 15 years. And we still do it today. It's kind of but it's built into your senses now. It's not, you're not saying it, but I mean, that's to give you an idea of how long back that was. 15 years ago, and I can remember it like it was today. So it's quite an incredible feeling that you get from this whole experience. So yeah.
I must say, when I did jump, I found the free falling absolutely exhilarating. That to me was the best part of doing the skydive. when
Yeah.
it was obviously a tandem skydive. When the guy opened the chute, it was different. It was lovely to watch the scenery go by and whatever.
Yeah.
But that exhilarating free falling out of the sky, it was. I've never had a feeling like that before.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the first thing that you get hooked on in skydiving is free fall. And I always try to explain someone or to anyone who talks to me and they say, so what's skydiving like? And I say, you know that feeling when you go down a roller coaster and it feels like your heart is in your stomach? It's nothing like that. It feels like you're floating because the air pressure on your body doesn't feel like you're falling anymore. You're not accelerating. And so, oh, really? It doesn't feel like you're falling? No, not at all. It feels like you. And did you feel that feeling when the air becomes tangible like water? If you do this, you turn left. If you do this, you turn right. It's like, it's no longer just a whiff of breeze. It's full-on pressurized air.
Yeah. That was incredible. And Matteo, when did you sort of realize that this could actually become a sport and a career for you to really focus on?
So ironically, it's never really been a career. Unfortunately, we don't have 7-day-a-week drop zones here, so it makes it very difficult to make a career out of skydiving. But it's interesting how life turns out. So if you stay in the sport long enough and you practice something for long enough, you end up generating skills just from practice and long hours and effort and just being in the sport longer than most have been. And so I don't think there ever was a realization. It's always just been fun, it's been enjoyable. And you go through these different chapters. You start off with team sport, and I started off with team skydiving, 4-way and 8-way formation skydiving competitively. And we did a number of these events throughout the years, a number of nationals, and you work your way up through junior, intermediate, senior level skydiving. And then, but all that time, you're always flying a parachute. And as you become more and more progressive through the sport, your parachutes, if you want to, become smaller and more agile and faster. And the rush starts to transition from being a free fall rush to when you open one of these guys up, it's like, it's intense. It's properly intense. So transition to that. And then after years and years of practice, that became my sport, It is a little bit easier. A team sport of 4 people, all A-type personalities, it offers a huge amount of reward, but it's also very difficult to manage and work on. So basically, this is quite easy. You go up, you jump out a bit lower than everyone else. Everyone else jumps out at 12,000 feet. You jump out at 6,000 feet. And then you've got the sky to yourself to play with this little pocket rocket. And yeah, so that's kind of how the transition happened. And then, after a few years of flying those and a bit of drive, you want to aim for the next level, and that naturally becomes competition and improvement and self-improvement and learning. And then we've got some amazing coaches in the country. Really, really, some of the best skydivers in the world are here in South Africa. And we've had a very long history of really good skydivers, from formation skydivers to swoopers or canopy pilots. And for such a small country, it's really it's great heritage. And some of the things I love the most are the stories from the days that we weren't even born yet. It was a totally different story.
Yeah, I'm sure. And just talking about sort of competition and those sort of elements, take us through the different sort of formats of competition. I believe there's artistic and classic accuracy, and the formations, landlines. Take us a little bit through a bit of the different elements.
Sure. So, I mean, old discipline that's been around for a number of years now, and I wish I looked up all the numbers. I don't have any of them, so I hope no one's watching trying to see my dates. But basically, one of the oldest is classic accuracy, right? So you open up a parachute, then you fly this parachute down onto a tiny little disc, and you tap it with your heel, and it's like a few centimeters that you have to try to get your foot onto this heel, onto this pad. So that was kind of the early days of accuracy and so on. Then as people started free falling on their bellies and they learned that this became quite safe, is that you do formation skydiving, which is people doing formations, and they give you 6 formations that you have to do in 35 seconds if you're doing 4-way, and you repeat those 6 until you kind of, until the time is run out, then you break away from each other and you open up your parachutes. Now, during those formations, I mean, the top guys in the world are doing like 30 plus formations in 35 seconds. So every second they're doing a formation. It's incredible. I mean, even more than that. I can't remember what the record is, but it's fairly high. So that's formation skydiving. Then the other disciplines you get are wingsuiting, which often people refer to as squirrel suits, but it's a wingsuit, and there are different disciplines or sub-disciplines within that. And ones where it's distance and float and how long you can stay up, other ones where it's speed, other ones where you do acrobatics. So you're flying two people upside down on your back, facing forward, side by side, moving over, etc., etc. So the wingsuiting I mentioned because it becomes relevant to the canopy piloting a little bit later, where we start merging two sports together. And then you get canopy piloting, which is the sport that I partake in predominantly. So those are the different areas, and they all need different levels of jumps, and they offer different kind of dangers. Oh, sorry, the one thing I did forget is artistic events, is which you talk about now, which is free falling through the sky on your feet or on your head and taking grips and doing formations, but on your head or on your feet or on your back, more kind of, they call that free fly sometimes.
And what is the canopy element that you do?
That's called canopy piloting or swooping. So typically you're looking at more than 1,000 jumps. You know, hopefully if you're very current, maybe a little bit less, but usually you start getting into this at more than 1,000 jumps. You fly your parachute at very high speeds, quite close to the ground. So when I send you the videos a little bit later, you'll see that you induce a turn, and in that turn, you're generating huge amounts of speed, up to 160 kilometers an hour, if not more. Yeah. And that's under a parachute, okay? Yeah. And then just before you get down to the ground, you change the angle of your canopy so that the canopy is now above your head and you're not facing straight down anymore. So it's like that. And it's how far over the ground you can go, or it's zone accuracy, where you drag your foot in the water and then you try land in a 2 by 2 meter square, or it is speed, where you go around a carved course and they measure your entrance and they measure the exit and they measure the time between, all right? And you get a speed through the time through the speed course. And those are the primary three disciplines in kind of what they now call classic canopy piloting. And then there's a new form of canopy piloting. It's been around many years, but it's more new in competition and very, very spectator friendly, which is called freestyle. And in freestyle, what we do is we do tricks on this water at like 100, 120, 130 k's an hour. So as we touch the water, we either kind of doing a Superman where we lay forward as we're going over the water, or my favorite move is called a Ghost Rider. As your feet touch the water, you take your hands out of all the controls, you put them to the side, and then you're kind of balancing on your feet, and your hips are maintaining the canopy's wing and kind of its direction. And then you try grab the toggles again, the controls, and fly the canopy, which it becomes a little bit more difficult because when you can't see them and you're trying to reach up and water spraying in your face and you get them, if you can grab the toggles and you can land on your feet at the end, you get really good points. So it's a low percentage move, but when you get it right, it scores quite high.
And you mentioned you need to do sort of around 1,000 jumps. I believe there's a tradition when you do your 100th jump. Are you able to share that with us?
I can. I mean, there really wasn't much to share, if you get my point. On your 100th jump, you do it naked. So it's some places in the world, this is a tradition. So on your 100th jump, in South Africa, it most certainly is that you go up and you jump naked out from 12,000 feet. Luckily, then the parachutes are a lot bigger and a lot safer, so you're unlikely to get roasties or some grass burn in areas where you don't want it. But yeah, mine was in the middle of July, so it was freezing. It was -12 up at altitude. It was absolutely crazy freezing, and yeah, so definitely not much to see in free fall. And ironically and unfortunately, we had the entire ladies team. So the four-way ladies team was on that flight. So it was like not the best moment in the world, but I mean, yeah, still in it.
Brave man for doing it. And just another point before we go into sort of your competitive side is when I was there, one of the guys mentioned that some of the guys actually throw their parachutes out of the plane and then jump after them. Is that something you've done before?
I'm not 100% sure that's been done in South Africa. You know, that has been done in the world. A very famous freestyle motocross rider, Travis Pastrana, has done some some jumps like that, and there's a few others that have jumped and as a kind of stunt, you know, got to the parachute, put it on, opened up. But no, I've got zero intention of doing that. Zero intention.
Good,
that does not sound like fun. Yeah.
And Matteo, when was the first time that you represented South Africa?
The first time I represented South Africa was in Montreal in 2016. Yes. So end of 2015, actually, I started competing in the sport called Canopy piloting, kind of beginning of 2015. So when I got my first cross-based parachute, which is a slightly more rigid wing and a lot faster. And you learn on this wing and you start to progress and your wings get smaller. And so I started training with some mates and training, you know, to hopefully you first have to international. So we've got quite a rigorous process. You can't just go into the open category and compete for South Africa. You first have to show that you can enter intermediate or the class below and demonstrate safe canopy piloting, which is almost an oxymoron. But as you get more into it, you start to learn that it is possible to be safe, but it takes time, you know. And it's one of the few sports or disciplines where you have to be extremely patient. You can't just rush it because your eyes need to learn how fast the ground is coming towards you. Now, if you jump from a really big parachute to a small one, your brain can't pick up those changes fast enough. And so you may not input on your parachute fast enough, so you can get severely injured. So that's why it's usually many jumps down the line. So 2015, we started, and Nationals 2015. And then just in about, sure, you know, I think you'd remember the exact date when this happened, but about June, July, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And I thought my dream for, you know, this was over. And anyway, so I had to go through quite a serious bout of chemo, which took me out of skydiving for about 3 months. And that kind of went on to about to December-ish, just before December, in November, December time. And coming back in Jan, Feb, I started back into competition straight away as soon as I regained some strength and internationals, and made it to my first World Championships, which was in Montreal, in 2016. So really great event, met some amazing people, mind was blown. I mean, when you go to one of these events for the first time, I tell you, it's just a humbling experience. That's all I can say. It's absolutely humbling, because when you're in a small pond, you kind of think that you're doing quite well. Then you go out into that big pond and you realize, and pond's the apt word because you can see it's what we do our skydiving over, but then you realize how little you know and how rubbish you are. And I think if you can make it through your first 2 world events really sucking, then you'll go on to get a lot better and work your way up through the ranks, because it's hugely psychological and it's an emotional train wreck. That's all I can say. It's an emotional train wreck. There are ups and downs and you know, highs and lows throughout the entire competition. You do one great jump and your next jump's absolute rubbish. And you get so hard on yourself and you're wondering why you're even out there and do you have any right to be out there? And the irony is you actually think other people care, and none of the other competitors give a shit, excuse my language, about what's happening in your life. They only really care about what's happening in theirs at that point. And once you realize actually everyone's there to have fun and compete and meet each other, it becomes a much more enjoyable event. So yeah, that's kind of the first World Champs.
And a twofold question next, just going back to what you've said in terms of your testicular cancer. Was skydiving probably the main thing that got you through that, because you had found such a love for the sport that you didn't want it to end and you drove yourself to that? And second thing, resulting in representing South Africa now, was it all worth it, having you sort of been through that journey and now you'd almost reached the pinnacle and wow, where I've come from sort of 6 to 7 months before?
So I would say coming through that had a big effect, right? Would I say that skydiving drove me so I'd say it was one of the things. I mean, I really love life. I enjoy it immensely. I mean, every day, even during lockdown, the being in Joburg, having a view of the trees, having the great sun, like I'm very fond of life. So no, I wouldn't say that drove me. I think the fear of failure probably drove me to continue pushing hard. And it was a very interesting space because whilst everyone else sat in their chairs during the chemo session, I used to struggle my way down the stairs into the gardens of the oncology center and actually sit under the trees. And it really genuinely helped. And so it was actually a very fast recovery thereafter. The second question, again, sorry, you're going to have
no problem. They're sort of representing South Africa, looking back at everything you'd been through. I mean, it must have been an incredibly emotional and uplifting experience.
That I can absolutely say, yes. So it had always been my dream to get my Protea colors in skydiving, or just full stop. It had always been a dream. And a lot of good athletes receive theirs around 5 to 6 to 7 years into skydiving if they've pushed really hard. Mine took 10 years. It took a really long time before I got my colors. It was a long time into the sport. And so it meant a hell of a lot to me when I finally did get the Protea colors. So yeah, and coming through chemo and really not sure of what would happen and, how strong my bones would be, because it's quite an intense chemo. But saying that, it's really kind of the common cold of cancers. So you get testicular cancer, and for all the guys out there who ever wondering about it, you just feel them, know what they feel like. If something changes, go to a doctor and just let them know. So just putting it out there because people should know. And it's one of the big things that drove me in those first few nationals was to bring awareness to this. And the only way I can do that is through things like this and through events like that.
100%. And then in July 2017, you went to the World Games and you set a continental record there.
Yes. So as it's interesting, these record and the way they work in different ways. So yes, it was a great event. That record probably wasn't my best jump ever. It was fun to do something like that at an event like that. But, if you take it, we've got some of the guys in previous events in our country had already gone way further. A guy by the name of Chris Teague had shot the lights out in distance. He a few years before me, one of my mentors in the sport, had also, broken a number of records, got a medal at a World Game. So, it's a continental record I'm quite proud of, and it's nice to have. I'd still say, though, the most heartwarming feeling was the Protea colors. That for me is like, that was great.
And then a bit later in your career, you shattered your foot. How did you do that?
So that was Poland the year after. So the World Games was in Poland. Firstly, that was an incredible event because it's a bunch of sports from all over the world, a bunch of athletes. It's like a mini Olympics, and it's incredible. So that was a really fun event, and we had a great time. The one coming up was the World Champs the following year in Poland. Unfortunately, in one of the distance runs where you kind of raise up, and then as you end up, my foot landed funny, and I shattered the navicular bone in my foot into about 3 different pieces. And so, I mean, it was really uncomfortable, to be honest, but it was an interesting experience to go to the Polish hospitals, and it made me quite happy to be living in South Africa, to be honest with you. Sure. We got some good doctors there. So I had to actually be flown back here to have an emergency surgery on the foot. And back to running, back to everything again. After a number of doctors had said, "There's no way you'll ever run again." So it's great. Yeah, everything's healed up very well.
Oh, that's good. How long were you sort of off your feet?
That I was literally off my feet, no pressure at all for 3 months. Then another kind of 4 weeks after that, light pressure, and then start back on. So it was quite a long time actually. It was about 4 months that I was out of it.
So I mean, you're getting quite used to these sort of 3-month gaps. You had the 3 months for the chemo, the 3 months for the foot, 3 months now for lockdown. It's sort of all part of your career. December 2018, you were at the 9th FIA World Cup with Team South Africa. team did very well, came sixth, and you got a bronze medal in the freestyle.
Yes, yes, that was a highlight of my life for sure. So alongside the Pro Tech colors, that event was it was quite something. So we were out with a bunch of mates in Dubai over the palm. It's a beautiful setting. It's quite a mind. It stresses your mind out quite a lot because you jump out and you've got this palm below you, right? You're over the ocean, and then you've got buildings literally as high as you are when you start your turn, right? It's just an absolute mental explosion. And so we start off with the classic events, which are speed, distance, accuracy, which are very precise. Everything has to be monitored. You have to plane out at just the right time, change your angle of attack at just the right time. Everything's very stressful, and you have to be kind of on the money. Then once those events are finished, it's freestyle, and it's like the after party of swoop competition. And so with freestyle, literally what you do is you don't have gates that you have to, like precise gates like behind you that you have to go through. You literally, it's how long you stay on the water doing your trick, how well you execute the trick, and how well you finish on the landing. And that was the event that previous year in the world Games, in fact, I started doing this Ghost Rider trick for the first time. Unfortunately, it lifted off the water a little bit, so you don't get as many points. But at that specific event, I was like, I'm going for it. I'm just going to go for this Ghost Rider. And it came out really, really well. Hit the water, laid back in the harness, took my hands out, managed to grab the toggles and do like a perfect landing, which jumped me up the ranks. So, you know, as you get through this, you know, it's now comes up to the second round. So there were 2 rounds in that event. And the second round, you know, you look at the score and you're sitting in third place or second place. And you're like, that can't be right. No way. And like, your brain's like, no way. And then it was time for the next round. So you go up and you just try to keep all of that out of your mind and do the next trick, which was what I called a lazy boy Ghost Rider double cowboy. So you take your hands out, you lie back in your harness, and you put your hands in the water and your feet are on the water, and you've got nothing in the controls. And came out, you know, landed not so pretty, but got out the water, so got the points, and ended up in third place, and was just absolutely blown away. It was the most incredible moment. Yeah, very happy about that.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's something very special and something that will live with you forever. Matteo, is there a specific country where the best jumpers come from, or is that just a very general question and there's guys
South Africa,
that all over the world?
South Africa, and no doubt about it, all the best jumpers come from here. No, I'm kidding.
And really?
No, there's no specific company. He produced some amazing skydivers with a little amount of, I mean, almost all the professional skydivers, that compete on the high level, all work during the week, only jump on weekends, if every second weekend, you know, it's like, so to compete is great. But in all seriousness, it's countries where they have 7-day-a-week drop zones or really good kind of associations that have a lot of money that they can sponsor their athletes and stuff. You know, there's not, unfortunately, and just because of the way it is, it's an expensive sport and there's not a lot of funding that goes into it, which obviously limits. Whereas if you look in the United States or France or Australia, they have very strong culture of supporting athletes and so on. And we do as much as we can. Our association's really good, but it does as much as it can with minimal resources.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier your jump in Dubai. Has that been the most sort of beautiful, amazing jump that you've done, or where in the world has been that jump for you?
That is a really good question and a very difficult one to answer. I'm gonna have to come back to that one. I mean, that's definitely visually incredible. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, I'm going to have to come back to you. I'd say that's right up there. I'm just trying to, it's been a long time of jumping, right? So you try to think through all the different years of, oh, great. And another great place, which is very beautiful, is a place called Empuria Brava in Spain. So it's kind of north of Barcelona on the coast. And I'd probably say that was of the most special kind of times, because you're there with when you're jumping, doing the swooping, you're doing it by yourself. But when you're doing formation skydiving, you're doing it with 4 really close friends. And I'd say that probably, there and over some game parks in South Africa are probably the top places, that I've jumped.
Yeah. Did you land in the game park?
Yeah, there's a golf course in the game park, but if you make a mistake, you're in a lion sanctuary, so you have to be pretty careful.
Brave man. Just in closing, Matteo, what is sort of the future hold for you in terms of skydiving?
Sure. So the future really does, what the big discipline that I've been focusing on recently is freestyle. So really shoot freestyle, and these guys hold some really amazing events all over the world yearly, and so that's pretty much the primary focus with competitions. We have the Mondial next year in Siberia, so that's all the disciplines of skydiving in the world together. And so yes, that will be a really great moment, and that's pretty much the future. The last one, actually, the World Champs was in South Africa, the World Cup last year, and so the next one is only next year because of COVID. It was meant to be this year in Siberia. So then, and I think competing just at the world events as far as I possibly can. Purely because you make mates for life there, really for life, and the only place you get to see them in one place again is when you're over at a world event like that. So I don't see this ending anytime soon, and if nothing else, just to catch up with your mates and enjoy flying. That's kind of the future, I think.
Yeah, well, it's certainly an exciting one, I would imagine, if not winning or just representing South Africa and jumping out of an airplane. I can't think of anything more exciting for you.
Very few things that are better than that, for sure.
Matteo, it's been brilliant chatting to you today on Sport SA Daily Diary. Thank you very much for your time. Let's hope you guys are able to get out there sooner rather than later, and you don't have too many more 3-month breaks in your career. Thanks, Adam. Adam, I really appreciate the time that you've taken for this interview. I hope you found it enlightening about our sport and the sport we do. And yes, look forward to catching up with you in future. Look forward to it, and maybe jumping with you. Awesome. Thanks, Matteo. Cheers. Bye-bye. Look out for tomorrow's episode of Sport SA Daily Diary, where we chat to the voice behind the scenes at most of the world's mountain biking events.